Our next speaker, Professor Dov Greenbaum, he has degrees all over from Yeshiva University, Yale, the University of California, Berkeley, Stanford, and ETH. His focus is in bioinformatics and big data, and he spent his time to look at the combination of legal, cyber, and bio aspects, which is really fascinating, and we are going to hear this here this morning. So please, Dov, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Oh, it's yours? Oh no, forget it. And I'll stay here. I'll stand by the mic. Great. So 3 caveats before I start speaking. Oh, you're doing time? Excellent. Number 1, I tend to speak quickly, so I want to apologize in advance. Number 2, I have this phobia of running out of slides, so I have way too many slides. And number 3, I speak so quickly that I will not, I actually, even though I speak quickly, I won't get through all my slides, and so I will probably skip ahead and summarize when the time tells me to summarize. So really quickly, this is a talk part in the area of cyberbiosecurity. It's an emerging area. I've got a book on this with a lot of interesting sort of topics in the space. And essentially, it is the combination of biosecurity, cybersecurity, and biotech, and law, and policy, which are all my fields. TTT. So when I teach my students how to speak, and I'm a horrible speaker, but my students are amazing. TTT. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So this is what I'm going to try and cover. Probably, again, won't cover all of it. I will discuss the bioeconomy, which is growing, of course, which needs protection. I'll talk a little bit about this particular area of cyber biosecurity. And then the goal was to look particularly at areas of generative AI at this intersection. So I'll try and give 3 case studies, one in the area of novel peptides, one in the area of synthetic data, and one in the area of digital twins. And then we won't get to the rest, so it's not even worth it. So where does this go? Okay, so the bioeconomy. So the bioeconomy is a huge area of our international economy. It includes the employment of biological resources for health outputs, as well as manufacturing, as well as for food, ag tech, and for energy. So in all these areas, this is what the bioeconomy includes. It is currently worth $4 trillion annually, so not a small part of our economy, and estimated to reach up to, I think, 20 trillion in the next couple of years. To give you a sense of the importance of what we call the bioeconomy, this is a recent paper by the OECD, I think, looking at all these countries that have sort of have strategies for dealing with bioeconomy, including the cyber aspects of the bioeconomy. And approximately, there's like 80 countries, I think, that have some effort into dealing with what will become a huge aspect of our economy. Of course, the World Economic Forum just recently also sort of talks about this bioeconomy and says that we are woefully lacking in terms of standards and protections and the like. There are gaps and inconsistencies in monitoring practices, need for tailored indicators for different sectors. So again, this is an area that is in dire need of help, but is huge. Right, so I said 30 trillion, according to, again, the World Bioeconomy Forum, whoever they are. The US government is also very much involved in this area. This is something put out by the National Academies of Sciences. Safeguarding the bioeconomy is a whole effort to look at strategies for sort of the cyber aspects of this. Biden put out something a couple years ago looking at a biotechnology and biomanufacturing initiative, again, looking at sort of the legal and the policy aspects of the bioeconomy. Okay, so there's a lot of sort of biological data that comes into the bioeconomy, and of course all of these areas of data are all areas that need to be protected in some way via cybersecurity. So we have sort of genetic data, proteomic data, which is the measurement of the proteins in your cell, microbiomic data, that's your gut proteins, and the gut sort of bacteria in you, clinical data from hospitals and wherever, pharmacogenomic data, that's sort of the combination of the clinical data and the genetic data together, behavioral and life sciences data, environmental exposure data, phenotypic data, biobank data, ag data, any sort of biological data associated with the bioeconomy is an area of data that needs to be protected. You guys can hear me through the mic, right? So let's quickly look at what is this area of biocybersecurity. So essentially, it's this idea of developing tools and methodologies and policies for dealing with all sorts of threats that exist. Again, whether or not they are threats in sort of the clinical data, they are threats to labs in the academia or labs in biotech, cyber threats in general, automated hacking efforts. So all of these sort of efforts, all these sorts of threats are all threats to the bioeconomy and all fall under the area of biocybersecurity or cyberbiosecurity. It's such a new area that actually the people don't know. The people who are writing in this area don't know if we should call it biocybersecurity or cyberbiosecurity. It's a big debate. If you can imagine, there's a big debate. So broadly speaking, this area of cyberbiosecurity, or biocybersecurity, however you like it, focuses on looking at these vulnerabilities for all these sorts of data sets, developing counter strategies, whether or not they're legal, or they're political, or they're technical, and of course promoting policies to promote these counter strategies. So let's look at generative AI in the biosciences, thinking about, we're all sort of ChatGPT and all the LLMs and Ilya from ChatGPT or OpenAI has an office here in Israel. So it's clearly a big area. And so thinking about where generative AI has a point in the biosciences, there's a lot of efforts in drug development, areas in sort of saving drugs from failing in clinical stages of trials, developing novel compounds, accelerated identification, optimization, and testing of various sort of drug opportunities. There's also the technologies being used for enhanced interpretation of data, and of course in the area of synthetic biology, for designing synthetic genes and designing synthetic pathways, biological circuits to deal with and develop new areas of innovation. And of course in healthcare, we have various aspects of generative AI. So to this end, to sort of give you an idea of how hot this is, so for example, there is a NIH multi-million-dollar grant that's coming due in a month, if not less, particularly in this area, looking at machine learning and AI and biocybersecurity. The NTI, which is a Nuclear Threat Institute, which is an international nonpartisan global NGO, published in October this sort of concern about the convergence of AI into life sciences. They've actually developed a biosecurity organization to safeguard biosciences in February of this year. So there's a big effort in this area as well. So this is a timely area with a lot of interest internationally. And broadly speaking, a lot of sort of these problems come up in what is known as a digital physical interface, this idea where you start designing things in the digital realm and then they become sort of physical in terms of either DNA or biomolecules, which is an area that Israel loves to talk about, which is this area of bioconvergence. Bioconvergence is this idea, again, of this, that developing biotechnology using artificial intelligence and the like is an area that's very hot here in Israel, or wants to be hot here in Israel. And so again, we have machine learning, medicine, technology, and biological engineering all sort of converging in this space and developing sort of these great new sort of ideas, but of course, interesting new problems. So one particular case study is novel peptides. So we all know, or we should all know, that a lot of innovative drugs are biologics. They're drugs that are antibodies and the like, that are, or peptides that are known within nature, that we sort of find in nature, and then we extract, we modify, we optimize for our own use. So this is a really hot area. It's been a hot area for the last 20 plus years in the area of biotechnology. But what generative AI has essentially allowed us to do in this space is not only look at peptides that exist in nature, but look at peptides that actually don't exist and have never existed, have never ever existed, probably will never exist in nature. But using generative AI, there's a bunch of innovative tech companies. One is Generate Biomedicines. They raised $273 million in a Series C round. And their goal is to essentially build an LLM for peptides. And building this LLM for peptides, they can create any molecule that they wish. Not only can they create any molecule they wish, they can actually test them, optimize them, and develop them, all within the confines of, of generative AI. So this is a Nature article, the same sort of thing, sort of highlighting sort of this Chroma, which is their LLM, I think, which again is designed to develop new and innovative peptides for medicine. Now, of course, this goes back already. This is a paper that I wrote 20 plus years ago. And one of the things that we noticed in this paper 20 plus years ago was, there's a whole host of proteins that based on just their folds, you can determine whether or not they are toxic or not. And so one of the problems is in sort of developing novel proteins is sort of the possibility of malicious actors going in, either using Chroma, hacking into the system, or somehow manipulating the system to not only create novel peptides for medications, but create dangerous novel peptides. Of course, there's a lot of non-novel dangerous peptides. Here's a list of the 10 most deadliest proteins on Earth according to Gizmodo. I guess they ran out of things to do listicles on. But in any event, right, these are the ones that we know about. Imagine having a world of proteins that we don't know about. So right now, there are efforts, sort of, according the Nuclear Threat Institute, the NTI, has developed sort of protocols for dealing with proteins that we do know. How do you deal with KYC? Know your customer. You get a call. You're a manufacturing. You're a DNA sequencer, or you're oligonucleotide developer, and you get a call from someone, and they say, "I'd like to send you a sequence. I want you to print it for me, and I'm going to introduce it into some cell in my lab." Right? How do I know that this person on the other end is a legitimate customer? How do I know that they're not a malicious entity? How do I know that the sequence that they want me to print or sequence out is safe? Now, of course, in the olden times, it was pretty easy because we had a list of all the toxic proteins. We had a list of folds that resulted in toxic proteins. And so we knew what to look for. Now we don't. With a company like Generate Biomedicine, what are they called again? What was the name? Yeah, Generate Biomedicine. You could create a de novo novel protein that we have no idea whether or not it is problematic or not. And so generative AI works on both ends. It can help you create that dangerous protein, but it can also be used as a tool to sort of screen for those proteins. And of course, to this end, there's a lot of efforts by the Biosecurity Innovating Risk Reduction Initiative, which came out again this past February, sort of thinking about how to develop protocols to make sure that this doesn't happen. Of course, having a centralized organization, which will never work because scientists don't like centralized organizations, but nevertheless, something that they have suggested. Okay, let's do another one, synthetic data. So synthetic data is another aspect in the area of biological data. If you don't know already, we're running out of data. Biology has an inherent limitation on the amount of data that exists, just because nature is an inherent limitation. And of course, how are we doing time? 6 minutes. So there is, not only in the area of biotechnology, but also there's a need, right? Wall Street Journal, April this past year, also says that we're running out of data and there's a need to develop new synthetic data to replace or to augment the amount of data that we have already. Now, of course, again, this raises a whole host of other issues. Is synthetic data the future of AI? Of course it is. In 2030, more data will be synthetic than otherwise. Of course, there are ethical concerns and legal concerns in terms of dealing with this development of synthetic data. Thinking about how to make sure that it is representative. How do we make sure that it represents a diversified sort of sample? making sure that there aren't any inherent biases in the system, making sure that it represents real-world situations. Again, these are areas that have to be dealt with in the area of synthetic data. And of course, the fear is, of course, that a malicious actor, again, will come in and supply synthetic data to drug companies or to labs and the like, and that synthetic data will not be representative of what it's supposed to be, will not represent the population as a whole, will have inherent biases in it, and of course, in the case of synthetic data, it's much harder to sort of assess whether or not these biases continue to exist. And so there is a concern, again, that malicious actors will come in and develop synthetic data that will be used by the industry at large that will be not representative and be more damaging than useful. Here's just a recent article, again, an archive, sort of talking about some of these issues in the area of synthetic data in bioeconomy and its roles. Okay, running quickly through here. Another area that's really interesting in the area of generative AI and the like, in the bioeconomy has to do with digital twins. So for those of you who don't know, digital twins is the future, supposedly. Now, digital twins have been around for some time, particularly, well, digital twins in the era of NASA have been around, I think, since the 80s. Digital twins are essentially a digital representation of the real world. But in the bio world, it's a little more recent. I know this guy, Mike Snyder, who's the last guy on this very long list of authors. Mike Snyder is a professor at Stanford who developed his own sort of digital twin of himself. Cost millions upon millions of dollars to do it, but he found out that he was pre-diabetic. So I guess it was worthwhile. And again, this is this idea sort of figuring out how to create a digital version of yourself. Now, to just give you an example of how you would do that, you would collect all this sorts of data, again, from sort of the medical device, Internet of Things, wearables and the like, and of course, all the regular data that you submit constantly to your healthcare systems. And of course, what's the, thinking about the purpose of developing a digital twin, sorry, back to here. I'm sure everyone is familiar with this movie, right? Sully Sullenberger, right? He crashed the plane into the Hudson River because he got hit with a bird, right? So this was a particular concern at the beginning. When you're developing a multi-million-dollar engine, Pratt Whitney, Rolls-Royce, whomever is developing a multi-million-dollar engine to put on a Airbus or a Boeing. One of the big concerns is, of course, bird strikes. And of course, how do you test for a bird strike on an airplane, on an engine? Well, you can do one of these things. This is a chicken gun. And the chicken gun flies frozen turkeys at engines to see whether or not it will survive a bird strike. And this one will survive, I think. It should be doing fine. No, did not work, right? So if you were Sully Sullenberg flying over the Hudson River, this would not, you would have a problem with this engine. Now, of course, if you're Boeing or your Rolls-Royce or your Pratt Whitney or your whatever, and you're developing these engines, these are very expensive to replace, very expensive to test. And so the whole world of digital twins was developed, again, by NASA to sort of develop these sort of tests to figure out whether or not to decide whether or not you could test these in the sort of digital realm rather than the physical realm. Now, of course, taking this engineering aspect and what's going on in the bioeconomy world is a lot of sort of transformation of the engineering systems into biology, and so taking this idea into the digital realm into the bio realm is a novel area. Currently, I don't think there's enough compute power on the planet to do it for a human, but we're getting there. And a lot of interesting issues, but I'll just end with this because I'm out of time. And that is when you're developing digital twins, so not only are there issues with terms of the cybersecurity aspects of digital twins, who controls access, who has rights to use it, but perhaps one of the interesting ethical questions that has come up is sort of, if you develop a digital twin of a human, can you do immoral experimentation on that, right? I hope everyone in this room is in agreement that you should not be doing immoral experimentation on a real human. The question is, should you be able to do immoral experimentation on a digital twin, whether or not you're a malicious person or not? So regardless of the cyber issues, this is just an issue in the area of digital twins. So I'm out of time. I've got so many more slides, but again, that's my phobia. So thank you very much for your time.